very basics of Lightroom editing. In future videos, I'm going to go on to greater depth about the very specific tools on Lightroom, but right now I'm only going to go through cropping and the basic editing features because those two alone can help you a long way. Something I would like to mention beforehand, which I probably will mention multiple times during this video, is that I've been editing for a very long time, and most professional photographers do this all the time. So if you're a beginner, please don't worry if it takes you a long time to figure this out. It should take you a long time. Editing is a process, and it is a long, tiring process. So basically, we see this photo here, and you can tell that the white balance is off. So as you can tell on this top right, I had a 1/80th of a second shutter speed and an f10 aperture. I was using a tripod, and I wanted to make sure that I had a very crisp photograph, but obviously I sacrificed a little bit of white balance issue. So right here I'm going to fix that with the temperature. So now you can tell that the white balance is a lot better than it was before, but we're even going to fix that even more in the other edits. So right here is the exposure button where you can make it really, really dark, or you can make it really light. You never want to go to the full extreme, but let's just work with it a little bit. And you could even see the number right here. Now let's work with contrast. Contrast can help your image pop out a lot, but sometimes it can do that a little bit too much. So let's do it a little bit more subtle. So right here is highlighting, and actually I think this is a great example with the fruit because right here it looks kind of rotten, and right here it does not look real. So let's make it a little bit better. I'm going to only bring it down a bit because if you look at the original photo, the whites were very, very bright. So now we're going to work on the shadows. It changes the darkness around it there. And whites and black, it detects where the lightest areas are and it changes that. And for blacks, it finds the darkest area and it changes that. It definitely works in a greater space than highlights and shadows. So I think these two tools are very helpful. And then with this section right here, this is definitely a section you have to be very careful with because you don't want to overuse it. Clarity can make a shot look really cool, but it also doesn't really look very realistic, and it's definitely not what I'm going for. Clarity, in my opinion, is something that you have to work very subtly on, but I normally do it a little bit because it really helps your image pop. Even if you don't notice it right away, it really does help a bit. And there's other ways to do that as well, but I like to include it. Texture brings out a lot of texture if you have it all the way, and also makes it very soft if you don't. And dehaze, they're just very extreme tools. I definitely don't use dehaze that much. And then in vibrance and saturation, these are going to do very similar things to the last two, but with color. So they're very extreme as well in both directions. In this case, I would say that the orange is very vibrant by itself, so I'm definitely not going to use either of those. The next thing I'm going to show, which I do think is one of the more important tools for specific types of photography, so if it involves people, or even in this situation with the still life, this is the color tool. Basically, you can control specific colors in your photograph. As I'm looking at this photograph, I realize that the orange might be a little bit too yellow than what I actually want it to be. So if you have the yellow here, I'm going to just take the saturation and bring it down a little bit. And you can see the very slight changes, but those slight changes go a long way in the future. The next thing I'm going to show is the detail tool. This tool is important for every single type of photograph you're going to have. For one thing, you should always sharpen any photograph you have. I normally bring it up right before that area where it starts to kind of bad. Let me show you what that looks like. It just, right here you see it looks way too grainy. You don't want your shots to look grainy. So I normally just bring it down where it still has that smooth texture, but it's a lot sharper than it was before. And, you know, there's all these other sections of this sharpening area where you can experiment. But I always like to bring up my noise reduction around 11 or 10 or 12, specifically because it smooths out all that sharpening that you just did while also keeping that texture. There's some other things with noise reduction I just want to go over. These are more specifically if you have a very low light shot and you need to have a much higher ISO. So if you have an ISO like 1600, 3200, or even 6400, you're probably in a very low light area, or you might have done it by accident, but you're probably in a very low light area that you needed to boost up your ISO so then the light sensitivity on your camera was much higher. And in those circumstances, you're going to have a much grainier shot. ISO brings in so much light, and it ends up, the main negative about it is that it makes your shot very grainy. Now, there is a way for you to fix some of that in Lightroom. Sometimes if it's too grainy, you really can't fix that much. But you can definitely fix it enough to make it look a lot better. So for example, this color tool, if you realize that your grain has the colors red, blue, or green, that means you probably shouldn't have gone up to that high of an ISO, and you could probably fix a lot of that with this color tool. Along with detail and smoothness, they both really help a lot with that grain. In this circumstance, I really can't show a good example of it since the picture does not have a lot of grain in it anyways, but it's something that you might want to experiment with in the future if you're ever in that situation where you'll need it. Those are really the main tools that I want to go over during this video, because those are the main tools that you're going to need to still get the excellent shot that you want. There's other tools in Lightroom that are really, really important, but without those tools, you really don't have the basics of the shot down. So yeah, I think that those were the most important. There's also the crop tool, which I believe in the finished product I did crop a little bit on the sides. One of my favorite things about Lightroom, and most editing platforms do, is they give you these preset crop tools, so you can make it a square. I wouldn't for this, but you could. You could do 5x7. That's something I do a lot. But here's my as shot. And if you ever just want to, stop with the crop feature, you just click done. I'm just going to give you a quick glimpse of what I'm about to go over in the future videos. So this is the spot removal tool. The spot removal tool will take off simple things like dust. You could take off a scratch, and it could also take off, maybe some acne. Then there's the transform tool. This is a gradient filter that goes over your photo, and then basically the same thing but in a circular way instead of a rectangular way. And then one of my favorite tools, which I use a lot with this shot, is the brush tool. And I will now show you the very finished product of my photo that took me many hours of editing. There we go. Okay, so what I used with this is brush tool, the basic tools, and the spot removal. And yeah, so that's basically how to do everything. The last thing I want to go over very quickly is just make sure that you're organizing your workspace. The different ways for you to organize it are these collection folders over here on the left side by using flagging, which you can maybe choose for your favorite photos. And you can also do these color ones. So I always do red for my favorites and blues for the ones that are edited. Something that my teacher always told us to do is to always create a virtual copy of every single one of your photographs that you decide to edit. The way we do that is you double click and you click create a virtual copy. And then you can see your before and after in an easier way. And if anything goes wrong, you will always have the original. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I open for questions at any time. After this video is over, you can ask me questions through the Zoom call, and then if the Zoom call ends and you realize you still have a question, I'm available on DM on my Instagram. That's jamiecohen.photography. And I also have a website, which I would love for you guys to check out. It's my complete photography portfolio, both film, digital, and it also has my awards. It also has a little photography business that I started as a high schooler just to expand my photography into event photography as well. So you can look into that. And it also has other things that I've done, including my web design business and my nonprofit. So anyways, I would really love for you guys to reach out to me through DM or through my website and just check it all out. Also, please make sure to watch the future videos explaining the other tools on Lightroom, because trust me, you're going to want to know what all those other tools do, and they're very important for certain shots that you're going to have. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will now be answering your questions. So, bye!